You're working in an East Texas railroad town in 1949, maybe chasing down stories for the Gazette. And you've had a hard slog, so you duck into a little cafe to rest your dogs and get a coffee while hollering out to friends and watching the little dramas going on in the booths. You see Dawkins sitting straight as a tombstone at his table, having a silent conversation with himself. The knife and fork in his hands look a little dangerous. Hold on there, fellow. Don't do it. Here? Scarebilly, Part 1. Fred Dawkins stabs a country fried. Detective Dawkins stabbed the meat with the fork to keep it from escaping, while he lowered his knife edge right on down. The knife played the meat like a violin. Twee, twee, twee. He smirked. He himself was the Texarkana maniac. Lafferty and Sims were too stupid to see it. He thought back to that time under the trees, his last victim laying there on the pine needles. The vic's condition was a tribute to the killer's high intelligence. A sudden quietness in the cafe interrupted Dawkins' reveries. He looked up. All faces were turned his way, all eyes watching him. A voice near the back wall said, "Shit, Fred, you didn't really think you could get away with it, did you?" This wasn't real. He shook his head. The cafe changed back to normal. Nobody was looking at him. He smiled, lifted a nervous finger, poked it toward the eaters, and shook it from side to side. Nobody paid him no mind. They all knew his ways. At the table in back of Dawkins, Lafferty whispered to Sims, "He starts out by thinking he done it himself. One day the guilty man passes in front of him and he nabs him. Yeah, that's the part I like. Whomp, like a panther dropping off a branch." Part 2. Dawkins going a visiting. Right after he stepped out of his vehicle, at the house formerly lived in by the victim, Zebulon Heil, age 5, Detective Dawkins saw a sad brown sack sitting in the mud beside a fence post. It had a sick face drawn on it in pencil, and it was stuffed full of rags. David Heil, Zebulon's 8-year-old brother, waddled over, with his fat red belly sticking out, and said, "That there's Dracula. See the fangs? We had a body for him out of Zeb's throwaway clothes, but Jimbo, the hero dog, tore the body off and scattered it all over the yard. Figured he was smart. Was going to bite Dracula for us." "Didn't know old Drac was working for you, Mr. Dawkins. Drac was a detective." Dawkins grinned sadly like the murderer he secretly was. "Your mama and daddy home, boy?" Inside the house, Edna lay big and pink in her shapeless bed, recovering from a heart attack. As Dawkins sat down beside her and talked to her, he looked at her pretty pink face and thought, hell of a thing to happen to a faithful Christian like her. He was sorry about the victim, too. Yeah. He looked to one side and saw his horse-like brown eyes in the dressing mirror, looking at him between perfume bottles. He took Edna's puffy hand, gave it a little squeeze. She sighed, "Lordy." He squeezed again, so softly. Part 3. Dawkins puzzles over a raccoon paw. When Detective Dawkins went outside the Heil residence in search of Henry, the victim's father, he found him leaning against a creosoted post where a raccoon paw was nailed. Henry looked like a sack of bricks. His big belly was about to bust out of his work shirt. He was off from the plant today. Boss had told him, "Go home and get drunk, Henry. Whiskey cures many disorders." "Henry," said Dawkins, "what would you do," and the birds went tweedledee, "if you found out who it was that killed little Zeb?" Detective Dawkins watched faithfully for the answer. A queasy smile slid over Henry's face and crawled up under his scalp. He flicked his stale eyes sideways at the raccoon paw next to his shoulder. "Replace that there with the ding-dong balls." "You going to skin him?" "Yep." Dawkins grinned a little, pleased at Henry. That imagination of his. "What you gonna do with his guts? I just got to know." "Give him to Jimbo, I guess." Dawkins thought, "Dang, good choice." He said, "Maybe Jimbo will find him for you, Henry. Jimbo has a good nose. Maybe Jimbo's about to find him for you right now." "I hope so." Detective Dawkins stood looking at Henry for a while before turning and walking back to his car. Part 4, A Passing Shadow. "I wonder who my next victim might be," thought Detective Dawkins, getting out of his car. "Hope it matches the thrill I got from the last one." He stood for a moment in thought, then turned toward the drugstore with cigarettes on his mind. A shadow flicked across his vision, and he reached out and grabbed something that turned out to be the shoulder of a sports jacket. He was holding onto a white male, preventing him from proceeding down the street. Suddenly his guilt leaped out like snake fangs and stunned the man he had caught, who turned his face around with big, ugly, scared eyes. "Say now," said the man, his pencil mustache lifting on one side, "this is a big mistake you're making here." The knife was found in the floor of the 46 Ford. Lafferty and Sims walked up to Detective Dawkins on the sidewalk in front of the drugstore. Good to have you back, Fred." "Back? Didn't think I went anywhere." "Oh, that's right. Uh-huh. You've been out there the whole time, partner." Lafferty winked sideways at Sims and gave Dawkins a slap on the back. Guess I better say right now, Dawkins never did like being touched. Things could cross. Still, he decided a smile might be possible.